For 25 years, Bandai Namco has been giving us the fruits of their labor. The Tales series have always been a unique staple in the JRPG genre. Through the years of development, the series has gone through evolution as well. Every game has become subject to change in some shape or form, be it through combat or storytelling. The latest entry is no exception, as it has grown to a full action RPG that utilizes all merits gained from previous installments. I will end the introduction on this note and will now present to you my review of Tales of Arise. The story takes place on a planet called Dana. It is being governed by its neighboring planet called Rena, which has a small satellite planet in between called Lenegis. The habitable parts of Dana are split into 5 kingdoms, so to speak. Each kingdom is ruled by a lord of Rena. Each of these kingdoms represent an element: fire, earth, wind, water, and light. Light is the 5th element since it is an element from Dana. The darkness element resides on Rena. You take control of a man in an iron mask, whom everyone also just calls Iron Mask. You are a slave, laboring for these men in great armor who are known as Renans. For centuries and as long as Danans can remember, the Renans have always been the slavers over them. You're pretty fed up with the slavery and stand up against the Renans through rebellious means. During these events, you meet a Renan woman, who has similar goals as yours. She grants you a power that no other man can wield except for you, because for some reason you cannot feel pain. When facing these villains, your mask is damaged, revealing a hidden truth of your past and your name, Alphen, which marks the beginning of an adventure to find yourself and to free the Danans. Along the way they will meet other companions, 2 companions in the next kingdom and the final 2 in the 3rd kingdom. I will not spoil the fun of uncovering that story in this review, but I will say it's an interesting story to meet them. The party manages to jump through many hoops and still land safely on the other side, but as in any recipe, more ingredients get added to the main dish, and it stirs and stirs, and the plot thickens and thickens. The strength of the Tales series is its unique combat system. Since the early releases, it is known as the LMBS, or Linear Motion Battle System. It is supposed to represent a 2D plane of movement, where you can just go back and forth like 2D fighting games. As the game progressed, so did the LMBS. It went from 2D to 3D, but still with the plane of movement tied to the locked on enemy. And in the latest entries, full free movement was utilized, but when attacking, you would always face the enemy. Arise has taken a turn to the full ARPG experience. The gameplay can be compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake or Kingdom Hearts, but is still different when actually playing. There are 3 options you can choose from when it comes to playstyle: auto, semi-auto, or manual. Semi-auto is the default choice, which lets you free roam on the battlefield, but from the moment you activate an art, you will first automatically move toward the enemy and perform the art when in range. Normal basic attacks will just work wherever you are standing. Full auto is self-explanatory, the AI takes over and you can watch everything happen. Manual means that you will need to do everything on your own. If you want to use an art that needs a specific range, you will need to walk toward that range yourself. You will not receive any aid. Speaking of arts, while your basic attack is linked to R1 or RB, 3 of the 4 phase buttons are bound to arts. And I'm speaking of controllers here, but for mouse and keyboard users that would be 1, 2, 3 or any other button combination of their preference. Circle or B are set to jumping, while the other 3 buttons can be configured to perform any art of your choice. This can be a ground art, which will be performed on the ground obviously. It can be a rising art, which will send you to a mid-air state after it's performed and possibly take the enemy with you if it's staggered. You can perform air arts while in mid-air state, or perform diving arts to return to the ground and also take the enemy with you upon hit. These arts cost AG, or Arts Gauge. You start with only 3 AG, but it will grow as you level up and unlock AG from titles you earn. These titles unlock upon various stages throughout the game. It can be through related milestones, finishing a sub-quest, obtaining a specific piece of equipment, etc. You will also be able to overlimit at a particular stage of the game. This means you have unlimited AG for a limited amount of time. Arts are spammable to your whim, and whenever you so wish within this time frame, you can hold 2 of the art phase buttons and your character will perform a mystic art. This mystic art is character specific and is a cutscene attack. I say your character here because it's possible to switch your active character at will, inside and outside of combat. Every character has their own weapon and fighting type. We have a sword, a gun, a book, polearm, fists, and a shield. You can already imagine how each of those are being used, right? Since you can control every single character, you will need to learn how they need to fight on their own. If you want to cast magic, you will need to stay away from the fight and cast your spells in a safe distance. If you want to be up close and personal, you can pick the character with fists and smack your way through. You can change on a whim, so you can play whatever, whenever. When you are in a combo with an enemy, a little diamond icon will start to be filled with a blue outline. If your combo goes unbroken until it's completely filled, you will receive the option to perform a boost strike. You press the directional button that represents a character, and that chosen character will randomly choose another party member to perform the boost strike. They will combine their power to one-shot the enemy into oblivion. If this is your first Tales game, you might notice the need for an XP grind here and there. It's intended to fight the groups of monsters you come across to stay on level. If you're running past some monsters, you might see a power spike when you encounter a boss battle. Having said that, I bested every encounter, scoured every land for resources, and had money and resources for my items and weapons. Some people might not have had enough and think the game has set progression walls in front of them, so you would need to buy microtransactions and gain ground. I'm not saying they're not doing it, since it might be slightly true in some cases, but the fact that they're selling levels or do double XP artifacts is something they've been doing for quite some time now, for earlier games as well. It didn't bother me, and I have even bought some of them, but I would understand if it would bother others. All in all, the combat is enjoyable and well balanced. You will definitely love if you have experience with other JRPGs. The world itself is beautiful. The anime style is perfect, and cutscenes will often be a drawn anime cutscene in the classic Tales fashion. And sometimes, when there is a rendered cutscene, the render quality can make it seem like it's a drawn one at first, but with rendered characters in them. It's phenomenal how it looks at times. However, I played this on PC, and even on the highest settings, the draw distance was not far at all. I can see bushes appear mere meters away from me. This will make it so that stuff in the background will seem washed out if you focus on it a little too hard. It's also not the highest quality you might be used to from AAA games. But in the grand scheme of things, the game looks really good if you're into an anime setting. When it comes to different environments though, this game has you covered as well. There is no one setting in this game, since we have 5 kingdoms with each their own element. So one land is covered in rocks and smoldering fire, and the other in darkness and snow. Another is green and mossy, filled with grass and mountains, while the other is water. You will never feel like you have stared to the same environment, since there is so much variation. The game is open to be modded as well. There are mods that make the character models more crisp throughout cutscenes and skits, but this can make your game crash more during long cutscenes and skits, since it renders the full characters instead of how they normally do it. It happened to me quite often, so I had to turn off the mod. But there are mods that change clothes on your characters in a cool and unique way, like making Alphen and Xian look like the 2 main characters of Scarlet Nexus. Or the naughty way, which I will not show here. Anyway, those skits I was talking about earlier are a means of the story and character's development. At certain points throughout the adventure, be it through traveling into a new environment, meeting a new person, finishing a subquest, you will see a pop-up in the bottom right corner of the screen. You press your designated button and you will see this manga-esque cutscene where the characters interact with each other. They can talk about a past experience, or it can be just some comedy relief. At some points, you will get 3 in a row, which can be a pain sometimes since these can take a couple minutes to finish, especially near the end. I remember skipping filler skits since they were dragging it out near the end, and it became frustrating as hell to see the button prompt. When you first set foot in the shoes of Iron Mask and you hear him speak, you will most definitely recognize the voice. Ray Chase takes the lead in the game as Alphen. You might know him from his work in Final Fantasy XV as Noctis, or the Master of Masters in Kingdom Hearts 3, or even the bad guy in Tales of Berseria. He performs his role as Alphen phenomenally. When Alphen is angry or sad or frustrated, you can really feel it, and I admire this in his voice acting. I didn't recognize the other voice actor from past experiences, but their work in this game is on par with Ray Chase's performance. Except this one character. I will not spoil too much, but just listen to this interaction. I mean no disrespect to the person recording this, since the normal conversation parts were solid, but the evil laughter was so cringe that I just couldn't even take it seriously. The soundtrack for this game is another piece of art. In many instances I felt captivated by the soundtrack alone. It hits home during battle, during travel, and during conversation. It's no wonder I bought the BGM on Steam since I just want to listen to it when not playing the game. The game offers 4 difficulty levels. Story, Normal, Intermediate, and Hard. Story is your basic, I'll walk through everything and feel amazing and no one can stop me. While Normal is your slightly harder version, where you have to work a little harder to get through the end. Intermediate, though, the difficulty I played on, requires dedication to fight as many fights as possible. If you won't, you'll absolutely feel the pressure when fighting bosses. I had never once died in a boss battle during the main campaign. I did have a TPK when trying to see what level a super monster was, but I don't count that as the game doesn't tell you which level a subquest requires you to be or what level a monster is until you start the encounter. For example, one of the giant creatures you encounter is a mantis. You think, hey, my first mini-boss, and I'm only level 5. Well, this creature is level 43, so get fucked. If you then decide to play this on hard, well, it's the same thing as intermediate, but you just have to play more safely and calculate encounters to the fullest so you dodge or block at the right moments. There are also no real puzzles in this game, which was sort of a downer. The only thing puzzling you have to do is make your way through a maze that isn't supposed to be a maze. For instance, you arrive in a castle. You are standing in room A, and your goal is to get into room B. But to get to room B, you need a key in room C, which is locked by a contraption in room D. You clear the contraption and find the key in room C that actually leads to room E, which leads to room F, where you can find the key to room B. If you're a longtime fan of the Tales games, you will certainly love this one. Although the ending might drag your will from your boots, you will still enjoy this game more than enough and is still well worth the full price. I would definitely recommend this game to any JRPG fan looking for a great time. In my overall experience, I racked up 70 hours of total playtime, of which 13 hours are combat. I've seen all the skits, and by seen I mean skipped over 100. I've beaten all the optional bosses and found all the secret weapons. I have also encountered cameos from previous Tales games, which were glorious. In conclusion, to the newcomers of the series, it might be a harder pill to swallow. It's definitely not your standard JRPG, as it stays true to its original formula. There's a chance you might not like it, but there's also a chance you may come to love it and reach out to previous Tales games. And if you do, Tales of Berseria, mwah, masterpiece. For the avid Tales fan, this entry will surely scratch the itch you had for another game. As I said earlier, it stays true to its formula and you will love every second of it. Except of course, maybe not towards the ending if you're like me, but then again you might love it even more as it's lore. When I first fired up the game, I was in love with how everything looked. It felt like home, like when I was playing previous titles. Whenever a mystic art was used or whenever a boost strike was activated, I was like, yeah, kill it! The only thing that was a pain was, near the ending. It was just cutscene after cutscene. You take a step, there's a skit, and then after the skit a cutscene, and then another prompt for a skit, and another one, followed by 3 others. It took about 2 hours when the pace settled, and I enjoyed it that much more. Especially when I met the cameos. That was glorious.